In this episode, I speak with Billy Annesley and Andrew Winter, co-founders of Bantee Golf. They discuss their backgrounds in golf, the inception of Bantee Golf during the COVID-19 pandemic, the importance of finding the right co-founders, and the challenges of launching a digital product. They discuss the importance of creating meaningful relationships rather than just focusing on numbers, the dynamics of running a business remotely, and the trends shaping the future of golf. They also share key lessons in entrepreneurship and the importance of having clear focus when building a product. Enjoy the show. Welcome to The Range, the podcast where we explore the intersection of passion and business in the world of golf. I'm your host, Ari Ratner, and each episode will dive into the stories of the innovators, entrepreneurs, and trailblazers who are transforming the game we love into thriving businesses. Whether you're a golf enthusiast, an inspiring entrepreneur, or just curious about the business behind the sport, you're in the right place. So grab your clubs and join us on The Range as we tee off into the world of golf entrepreneurship. Welcome back to another episode of The Range. Today, I'm super excited to have a conversation with Billy Annesley and Andrew Winter, co-founders of Bantee Golf. Billy, Andrew, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Pumped to be here.
Yeah, awesome. As we had an intake call and I've learned a bit more about your business, before we jump into the app, would love to give the audience a sense of your connection to the sport. So, Billy, I don't know if you want to go first and just tell the audience how you first started to pick up the sticks and get into the game.
Yeah, happy to share. So my dad and grandfather were members at Philadelphia Country Club right outside Philly, and so I guess I've technically been a member there my whole life since they were members when I was born. And just growing up, my dad would take me out with my grandfather to the practice hole and range. And they have 27 holes. So like their third nine's definitely not as crowded because they have like a primary 18. So it's like great for parents to take kids out. It's like a little slower paced, and just grew up doing that, like, in the spring, summer, fall, and just fell in love with it. And then kind of picked up other sports as I got a little older, and, like in college and after college, as you get older and you stop playing recreational sports, just kind of fell back in love with it. And COVID happened, and that's just when, it was like golf is life, kind of just, it was the only thing you could do.
What's your handicap, just out of curiosity?
I think it's a 17 right now. So I am pretty average or below average, but I have fun out there. So that's
what matters.
Approach it.
Awesome. Andrew, how about you?
Yeah, sort of similar. I mean, I've been playing golf my whole life. I grew up in Connecticut. Actually, my backyard sort of extended onto a golf course in town. So I was playing golf since, as long as I could remember, probably like 3 or 4 years old. Really ended up being my number one sport. I played every sport growing up, but got to high school and actually played on the golf team there. And then went on to play college golf, D3 at a school called Washington and Lee. Was never really that good in the college golf world, but loved playing competitively. And then sort of like Billy, stopped playing for a few years at that point. And then, around COVID as well, sort of got back into it. And, I'm not as good as I used to be, but it's still my favorite thing to do.
But it's interesting. I share similarities with both of you, although more with Andrew in the sense of I grew up with a golf course in my backyard. Unfortunately, though, I was stuck on playing soccer and basketball growing up, so I didn't pick up sticks until COVID hit. So I'm a COVID golfer, although Billy, to your point, golf is life. I've fallen deeply in love with the sport and am quite passionate about it. So appreciate you guys joining. Billy, I know that the genesis of Bantee Golf happened during COVID, but would love to kind of take the audience through the story of how you came up with the idea, and then we could progress into meeting Andrew and starting to kind of build the app from concept to MVP.
Yeah. So I was down at, in COVID, you're working remote and just have a lot more time on your hands. So kind of was always trying to come up with some ideas, and was down in Pinehurst. This was like November of 2020 with my college buddies, and just my dad kept texting me like, how are you guys playing? How are you doing? So when I got home, it just kind of hit me like, there's got to be a way to kind of, track your friends' rounds in real time, and, where my dad could just see my scores hole by hole and comment and stuff. So that's kind of how it really kind of started to originate. And a friend of mine started a app as well. So kind of connected with him and just asked like, hey, I have this idea, like what's step one? Like, never started a company before, non-technical. So I'm just like, what do I do first? And he's like, just wireframe it. And I actually didn't know what that meant at the time. So I went to YouTube and, it really wasn't all that complicated. It's, just placing buttons and icons and some screen design. So I had a lot of fun with that. And he also was like, that'll save you a ton of money versus going to somewhere just asking them to design it. So had a lot of fun designing what like we thought the MVP would look like. And then got a agency out of Australia to help build the MVP at like a very fair rate for like startup founders. So that started to kick off in December of 21, I think. It was either December of 21. That timing makes sense. And then shortly thereafter was kind of in the search for a co-founder, kind of being non-technical and not having started a company. Was like, definitely want someone who's as passionate about this to come in with me. And I'll let Andrew tell the real story, but Andrew was working on Birdie Book, which is, you'll learn, is very similar to Bantee in a way. So it just was kind of the perfect fit. And then we linked up and kind of have been grinding ever since.
Before Andrew jumps in, would love to hear from your perspective, as we're trying to, inform the audience on what it takes to actually get a business off the ground, right? Because I think, I'm an idea person. I've had tons of ideas, I've been able to pursue a few of them, but actually going from idea to business and investing in having an agency build, your MVP or your first iteration of an app. What drove you to not just think of the idea, but then pursue it into an actual business?
I think that moment came after I kind of finished all the wireframes and was like, well, what am I doing with all these? Like, I'm either going to actually go take the risk and, hire this agency to go do it, or like that was just, and somewhat could be considered a giant waste of time. So I kind of was like, you know what, like, life's short, and I, was feeling good about it, had some good conversations with people about the idea, and was just like, let's go all in. And I think like kind of getting the fundamentals of the company were pretty kind of important to me to make sure like, the LLC was set up properly and all the admin stuff on the, the back end was organized just so that I didn't have to deal with that after the fact, which I guess in hindsight, it wouldn't have been that hard to deal with after the fact, but I'm happy that everything was kind of set up from the get-go the right way. And I think a lot of that also came with the name, because I wanted to make sure that the LLC was representative of our name. So I think my delay in getting that started was just waiting until the name kind of hit for what I wanted to go build. And once I had Bantee, it was kind of, all right, like let's hit the ground running, and got the LLC made and filed and the logo. And yeah, it's just kind of, doubling down on yourself and pulling the trigger really is just what it takes.
Yeah, that's awesome. So then enter Andrew. And Andrew, I'll let you kind of tell your story on how you joined and why you joined.
Yeah, so Billy mentioned I had similarly started a golf company during COVID. A little bit different. Like for me, when I was starting it, like I was still working. I was actually still in New York at the time. Now I'm out in California, but I had spent a lot of time looking at like the Shopify ecosystem. So this is now in the world of like e-commerce. And I thought it would be fun to just build some version of like a very simple e-commerce business, sort of as like a side project or like a weekend hustle. So I came up with this idea called Birdie Book, which is essentially a physical journal that was just filled with blank scorecard pages. And the idea was to essentially build like a diary of your golf experiences, which for me was like, I don't know if you've ever done this or had people who do this, but I still do this. Like I'll keep a lot of my scorecards. I used to have like a binder full of scorecards when I went to all of these very cool places, but eventually you would lose them or they would disappear. And I sort of had this idea where like, what if you could just stack your bookshelf with all of these like journals of, maybe just 20 scores per book. And it was, this very organized view of your golf life and where you've played and where you've been. And it was just a way for me to learn how to also build a business, like figured out how to run Instagram ads, figured out how to design the little journals, like went to a manufacturer to figure that out. So it was fun. And the coolest part about e-com is like you end up getting all of these things shipped to your house, and then orders start coming in and you're putting them in the little boxes. You're filling out like the shipping pack and sending that off to FedEx or UPS or whatever. So that was really cool, but it was really never, I had no plans for it to amount to anything more than that. And then I had started looking for a new job, and I had been in startups and tech for a few years at that point, and was like, I sort of want to go build my own thing, but was more than happy to see like what other people were building. And there's a platform called Y Combinator, which is this whole like startup ecosystem, and they have a place where you can meet your potential co-founder. It's sort of like a Tinder for co-founders. So I, like created my profile there and was talking to different people who were working on ideas. One of whom was Billy, who reached out with the idea for Bantee. And I was like, this is the perfect, complement to what I was doing with Birdie Book, but a much more, ambitious business that I would actually sort of feel good about going after long term. So that's sort of where I came into the picture, and, where we've been ever since.
That's awesome. Talk a little bit about, and not to focus on kind of the analogy of dating, but like talk a little bit about that process of getting to know each other to make sure as founders who, share a passion for golf, share this interest and idea of bringing a social aspect to the game that is, virtual, right? Talk a little bit about the process of getting to know each other and the importance of putting everything out on the table to make sure that as you guys are co-founders of the business, people often say you don't want to start a business with your friends, but you do want to start a business with people you trust, right? And so talk a little bit about that process, and whether through Y Combinator or after the fact, how you've built that relationship to trust one another to help grow the business.
Yeah, I guess I can start. So after, I LinkedIn messaged Andrew, and, then we follow each other on like Instagram, and you kind of see you have mutual connections. So we did, it was kind of small world of some people we knew that were mutual friends. And, you kind of just were like, hey, what do you think of this guy? Like, what do you know about him? And, all things checked out on Andrew's end for me. And I just think that, having those conversations, hopping on calls, and again, this was over COVID, and Andrew was, I think, where were you at the time? Colorado,
I was
Florida,
really
California.
between New York and Connecticut back then.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Andrew's lived all over the place since we met, but having those conversations and getting to know each other, and I know, and Andrew and I are very similar in age. I think we're like a year apart. So, and we also grew up with social media relatively. It all came out when we were like in high school and college. So I think kind of knowing the target market for it, and what being adopters of it just over our last 10 to 15 years, I think we really did have that shared vision of where this can go and how it's scalable. As Andrew said, it's like an ambitious idea that kind of has an endless ceiling of users, hopefully. So it just getting to know each other. And then I forget when we first met in person, but we made an effort to meet up, and when he was like in the area. So that's kind of how we kind of took it step by step, getting to just, build that trust and have the faith to go all in.
Yeah. I mean, just in terms of logistics, because maybe it's interesting to the audience, like we definitely, like we started with like a trial, like we didn't sign the docs immediately, which I think is important. Like you sort of spend time, like, Billy like added me to Slack, he invited me to Google Drive, and he starts sharing all of these materials with me, like just to get my eyes on it. And you sort of are like, as the co-founder coming on, you sort of want to be like, I want to learn as much as I can before, I sign up for this. So it's also like a good way to start slow and just piecemeal it together, where it's like, all right, here's what we're going to work on for the next month. And if we like that and we feel good about it, then, you sort of take the next step and start thinking about what the cap table looks like, and what, the docs look like, and getting, legal involved. And I don't think you need to rush into that, but I think it's good to be conscious of it and not just, let it, go forever without having that conversation.
Yeah. Was your first meeting at a golf course, or was it just a coffee shop or something random?
When we first met up, I think it was I came to Philly, Billy. So I think it was at your house, and we eventually did go play golf later that weekend.
Yeah, we played golf, and then the next time I think was at the PGA show in Florida, which had a few days together down there for the week. So that was a really great bonding time, just to kind of, we had an Airbnb, we were in a booth all day, and that was right when we launched. So that was like pretty exciting, a lot of momentum.
Was that which year was that?
That was January of 23.
Okay. Yeah. So talk a little bit about that experience at the PGA show, launching the app, starting to get it in front of the golf community in a more broad way. Obviously, I'm sure you guys shared it with your close community. But talk a little bit about that experience and the positives, maybe some of the negatives, just general experience for both of you.
Yeah. So that October before the show, so October of 22, we brought on, his name's Connor McGale. He was a full stack engineer out of Scotland, and we brought him on as like a contractor and offboarded the agency that built the MVP. And the app was like, I would say, still a total mess. The MVP was like nowhere near launch. And when we got the booth at the show, it was in the inventor spotlight section. So it was kind of like for startups or just, up and coming products. And we're like, we got to get this live so like we can tell people to download it at the show versus just like, hey, it's coming soon. Like we didn't want to like, this was a great opportunity with foot traffic to kind of get, those initial downloads. And it was just a total chaotic grind to get this thing live in time. So it was like just a lot of hours stress. And I think it was a lot on Connor, but he crushed it and got it live. And Andrew, myself, and our UI designer, Jack Yusko, went down. And it was just a blast to be with those two guys who you just are on hours of calls with trying to, build this thing and, keep momentum going. And it was just a really rewarding experience. And, the reception of the app down there was great. And, while it was live on the App Store, we still are like, that's not when we kind of just got it live so we could say go download it, but it was still like a total giant bug of a mess at the time. But, it still worked. It just it still needed some polishing at that time.
Talk about the decision though, and the importance of it to be able to tell people to go download it, right? Even if it wasn't optimal or it had some bugs, showing what the vision was, I think would be an important step in starting to build the brand and starting to build some awareness of the app within the golf community.
Yeah. And I think this one, Andrew can kind of speak to more, but Andrew, kind of has the just ship it mentality. Like, it's never going to be perfect. Like just, we got to go. Like there's, nothing like the present. So, Andrew kind of, I think, sparked that, like, let's just get it live, like get it, doesn't really matter. Like we'll be able to fix it. We'll be okay. But like, we just got to ship it and go. So I don't know if Andrew, if you have anything else to add there, but.
Yeah. I mean, especially at the PGA show, because we didn't go this year in 2024. 2023 was the first year we had gone. And it was interesting because we very much were unique there in the sense that we were a digital product.
Yeah.
Like it's really a trade show. Like most of the booths are like selling like golf cart equipment or like retail. So it was harder for us to drive engagement like at our booth. There wasn't something for people to feel or like, like have their hands on. We did make a good decision and we got like a big TV on top of our booth where we had like a slideshow of what the app looked like. And then we had a little demo set up in front so people could at least come and play around with it. And we could, at least get feedback about it. I think that was, to Billy's point about like shipping it and just moving quickly. Like you don't really know what you don't know until you get people's opinion on it. So we thought we had this idea of what Bantee was or could be, but like we needed to get feedback, go do another round of implementation and building, and then get more feedback on it. And just building that cycle into the way that we have thought about the business, I think has been pretty important.
And you mentioned something about, at the show, it's very much a physical product driven show. And you as a former entrepreneur with a physical product, talk a little bit about the benefits of being a digital product and also the challenges.
Yeah, honestly, like we did a pretty interesting, like it was multiple days. So the first day we were like at the booth the whole time. And then people are walking around and we were in this like startup exhibit where people are just coming to learn about you. And that was the best way to meet people and tell them about Bantee. But as we walked around, we kind of realized that maybe there's actually a better use of our time, which is just going to meet more of like the other business people here, not necessarily like the golfers themselves. So on day 2, we sort of split up and like would have one person manning the booth. And then the rest of us would go walk around and try to like make contacts in the golf industry, right? Like if you don't leave that show with a ton of people who you can, either sell to or work with from like a B2B partnership angle, like, I think you've probably done yourself a disservice. So that maybe ended up being more valuable, was like actually going around and meeting other founders and other, CEOs and executives and telling them who we are, because golf's like a very small world. So you want people who can vouch for you. And I think that was like the way that we sort of approached it on the second day, which I think ended up being a little bit more beneficial.
Yeah, it's interesting. And with the guests I've spoken with, a lot of the importance of building the business centers around community, and your app is centered around community. And talk a little bit about how from that show, the people you've met and just the experience so far within the golf community has helped kind of keep you guys pushing and going and helping to grow.
Yeah, I think that, after the show and the feedback, you just like have this amazing momentum within you just leaving it, and you just are super excited to get back to your computer at home and your routine and build and just kind of keep growing the brand. And over this time, I will say Andrew's also taught himself how to code. So he's been able to just like get back into the product and dive. But at that time, we were both more on the business front of side, kind of building partnerships and relationships. And that really was like the top priority at the time after the show, after you get all these contacts and they're like, let's chat next week. So I think leaving the show, it really, was inspiring to go build these relationships that we still have today and, have continued to develop and met various other people from them. So I think it's just a great experience. And I think if we did go back to the show, we probably wouldn't do a booth so we could go build more relationships and be like, have our feet on the ground, meeting as many people as we can.
Yeah.
Just walk the floor.
Just like even like a quick example, I'll give a shout out to my guy, LaShawn, who runs a business, Two Guys with Balls, twoguyswithballs.com. And they're this other, two co-founders who started this business selling used golf balls. We met at the PGA show and we sort of just stayed in touch on like a monthly or like a quarterly basis with updates on how they're doing, how we're doing. And then, almost a year later, we finally figured out how to implement an advertising unit inside of the Bantee app. And we started reaching out to people like, hey, we don't really know how this is going to work, how it's going to perform, what the CVRs are going to look like how much revenue this will drive. But like, we're looking for people to pilot it with us.
Mm-hmm.
And I reached out to LaShawn and he was like, yes, 100% would love to. So it's those kinds of things where if you hadn't met that person in person, it would be harder to see if that would come to life. But that stuff has been really exciting.
That's awesome. And Billy, I know Andrew is more of the technical person, but I did just see on LinkedIn that he's not the only one who has written a line of code or some code for the app. So just want to shout out you and say kudos as another non-technical person, that it's a pretty big feat and you should be proud. But tell the audience a little bit about why you did it and what it meant to you to be able to kind of stretch outside, your skill set to help the app.
Yeah, I think coding's like something that when I was in 7th grade, we actually had a coding class, which I thought like, when I look back, I'm like, why didn't my high school teach us that every year up until we graduated? But so I did remember some like basics of it, but it really was, I think just, we have a lot of things to focus on the, business front outside of the kind of technical side of things. And I think my only worry was ever like, if I do learn how to code, then I'm just going to dive all in there and just kind of get lost in the mix of, with the headphones on coding and trying to, build and build and build. But I just, I think as I mentioned in my post, like, as the farther we get along and the more the product develops, like, I think I felt a little distant from it just because I don't know how all those things work on the back end. And it's harder for me to talk to it, whether it's on calls or with investors or just, kind of my own conversations within myself about like, how should we go about building things? And I just wanted to gain more insight into like our own product. And, Andrew got me all set up within the Xcode base on Apple and Cursor. And, with AI, a lot of this stuff is, not as difficult as it probably was like 15 or even 5 years ago. So I think that it's a really great time to get into coding and learn the basics. And I'll probably be sticking to a lot of the front end stuff, whether it's changing some colors, some design, but no, it's awesome. It was really fun. And I still, for all intents and purposes, have no idea what I'm doing with the code, but day one was a success. So, we're going to keep building day by day.
Well, as an entrepreneur, I think you constantly are trying to learn and become more of a 5-tool player, right? So kudos to you to be able to, take that on as a goal and then achieve it. We've talked briefly about the difference between a physical product and a digital product. As Andrew mentioned earlier, there's, or Billy actually mentioned it about Andrew, is that, nothing's ever going to be perfect or done in a digital world, right? So as you guys think about the next year, the next 3 years, and the evolution of the app versus continuing to try to grow the user base? How do you balance that from a priority standpoint?
I'll start here. I mean, we're still like so small in terms of like the grand scheme of things. So for us, it's like not a finished idea, let alone a finished product. Like, I don't even think we could concretely say what Bantee will be in 3 years. So I think where my head goes to is just like making sure that we have like the fastest learning curve of anyone in this space. Like there's so many golf apps out there. They all have these different value propositions and they all attract different types of users, and figuring out how Bantee differentiates itself. And at least I will say on like the software side, consumers like have such a higher bar for quality than they used to.
Mm-hmm.
And that is like one thing that I almost think we probably didn't account for as much upfront, but like, especially in a social environment, like if those interactions aren't amazing, like you lose people pretty quickly. So like we have a lot to fix there, but I feel much better than I did even like a few months ago about just like where Bantee is starting to spread its wings and sort of make a name for itself. That's not just another golf app.
No, yeah, I think I agree fully on that. And like, when we talk about like features and design, it's like kind of Andrew touched on. It's like, well, obviously like Instagram's the GOAT, but like that's like as Andrew like that's everyone's kind of like low, like they don't want anything like worse than that. They don't want to use an app that like, even when you go on like to try to book a plane and like, those airline apps stink. You're just like, this is an awful experience. So you're trying to you almost need to compete in terms of like your UI design and speed with like the top dogs. And obviously as a bootstrap startup, that is very difficult to do. But I think for us, like our goal at the end of the day is to make sure like Bantee is, a clean, easy to use app. Like, we don't need to overcomplicate it with a zillion features. It's not going to make you better at golf. It's, you get better at golf by going to the range and practicing. No app's ever going to make you better. So we don't try to do that. But we just, hope that it can, I guess, blossom into this, your go-to golf app for, your communities and events, hopefully that, people can sign up for through the app, and almost like your like Resi too, like a version of Resi, favoriting your favorite golf courses, like scheduling tee times through it. And, your golf diary can be Bantee, like what Andrew was building with Birdie Book. It's your profile has all your past rounds, photos, some stats, and it's kind of your golf life in one place.
Yeah, talk a little bit about how like the evolution of the app from, even before the MVP, the idea for what it was versus what it is today, and the different features that it has and serves for the golfer.
Yeah. So the MVP was essentially just follow and track your friends' rounds in real time. It was like Strava meets an Instagram feed for golf. So you post your scores hole by hole or every couple holes, and your friends can comment and like. And that is still true on the app today. But I'll let Andrew take over this at some point, because he, through trial and error of just, messing around in the code and having ideas and kind of launching things through Google Sheets as trial, Andrew's kind of come up with a ton of things that are now in the app that, have really expanded on that core MVP idea. And the best case of this is the community pages that did originally launch on just a Google Sheet, and it was live in our app through Google. And I was like, you can do that through Google Sheets? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, it is funny. I think like when we first started Bantee, it was sort of like Instagram for golf. It was like golf social media, which like as time went on, I don't think was a strong enough either like painkiller. Like no one really had that problem of like, I wish I had social media for golf, or it didn't like make their lives better because they could now, just create some consolidated view of like golf photos. Like that just wasn't a strong enough pull for consumers. So then it was like, how do you combine this like very compelling multiplayer experience, which is the social network? You can follow your friends and engage with them in real time, with like also, to Billy's point, like a single player use case of you can document your golf life and create this really compelling profile view of why, you've spent so much time with this game. So that's sort of like the two-pronged approach that we've now gone with, is making a really strong value prop just for you alone, like forget that any of your friends are on it. And then at the same time, layer on this hopefully really exciting and vibrant and like joyful social network. And the point that Billy makes there around communities is like, we don't want to be the best app to help you improve your golf game. Like there's that space is so competitive. And if anything, we would rather tell you, like, you don't even need to open Bantee when you're on the course. Like if you want to take a couple photos and post them to your round and use the digital scorecard, like that's a really good product that we're really happy with.
Mm-hmm.
But if anything, we're sort of more interested in before you get to the course and then like the 19th hole, like once you finish your round, like how do you share that experience? So it's not trying to help you figure out what club to hit. And the version of that we've come up with is basically your golf group chat brought to life. So now you can find all of these different communities on Bantee, whether it's the college you went to, your city, like I'm in the San Francisco Bantee community, and you can find other people to go play with there, or even like your private buddies group chat, like your bachelor party trip, whatever it is, like all of the sort of connective tissue around golf, that's sort of the space that we're playing in right now.
That's awesome. Love the evolution. And I think it's again important because there's such a strong community and sub communities within golf. So I think that hits it right on the head. When I think of a digital product, right, I think of success being the number of users that are using it on a monthly basis, what have you. But talk a little bit about how you guys are viewing success so far and some of the challenges around achieving some of the numbers that you may want to achieve.
Yeah, I think that, well, I think one of the biggest challenges is seasonality of golf. And, I live up in Philadelphia or outside of Philly, and, that's where I spend my time. So the seasonality of being able to play and get out there and for people. And we have a lot of users from this area just from kind of the way I've tried to go market it. And Andrew's in San Francisco, which I know has a more steady weather, but still kind of can be cold at times. But I think that that's been kind of, you see the numbers change over the winter months on our kind of dashboard. So it's definitely a challenge of ours that we need to kind of go, create more usage in the kind of the Floridas, Arizonas, and Texases to, kind of keep that user, what am I thinking? Users, like the MAUs up, DAUs. So I think that's a big challenge. And I just think that user acquisition overall isn't a challenge in general, like trying to get people to try a new app. And, Andrew touched on it with not framing it as just a pure social media app. There's plenty of them out there. So I think the community aspects are really a great user acquisition hack, because if we, work with a community that has 200 members or 100 or 50, it's like, well, we're having a conversation with Ari, who runs a Thursday night golf league. And, if he wants his league on it, he could hopefully help us get a ton of members to use it. And then from there, it's kind of getting them to come back and keep, finding the value on that personal side of things, like with Bantee, not just for their league, like recording their rounds on their own, like when they play, with their wife or friends, so I think it's just kind of having that retention and having that value prop to keep people wanting to come back. And I'll let Andrew kind of add on to that if you have any thoughts there.
Yeah, no, I do agree with all of that. It is funny. We could even talk a little bit about the business model. And, when we first started talking to investors, we sort of went with that social media pitch. And if you just extrapolated out that for a golf social media product, you pretty quickly realize that wouldn't pencil for a venture capital firm. They're probably the market of just users is maybe big enough, but certainly people don't play enough golf to justify the usage where you could create an advertising model that would be, a $1 billion outcome. So that was a really interesting learning, was if we're talking to people about the business and we're saying we're going to have the most, nonstop users, endless scrolling, daily usage is never going to end. I think that's just, we're probably starting off in the wrong place. We're probably looking for more depth in the context of our relationship with users than just eyeballs alone. So I think that's the place where we're trying to tweak our pitch a little bit, is we want a really strong relationship with our consumers, but not, we're not an entertainment product, a feed that you're just going to scroll like TikTok when you're on the couch. We're just not going to be able to compete with that from an eyeballs perspective. We're a place that you open up WhatsApp or GroupMe, and you're going to have meaningful conversations with people that you know. And that's just a different way of thinking about the business that we've had to figure out.
Yeah. I was, following up on that, conversation. Is there or are there apps that you look at outside of the golf industry that you say, okay, if Bantee has that amount of usage or that type of usage, like that's success?
Yeah, Strava. 100 like to like I more and more like every day I'm like Strava. It's so funny, they just had the New York Marathon this past weekend and my friends ran in it. If you're looking at Strava that day, like the depth of the posts on Strava are so compelling. It's such a cool story that they're telling on that platform, and it's not like an endless scroll, but it's a really rewarding like platform to spend time on. So by far and away, like I think Strava has the best version of the product that we're trying to build in a slightly different category.
That's awesome. And seems like a compelling pitch, Strava for golf, but that's great. I want to pivot a bit and talk about the dynamic between Billy on the East Coast, Andrew on the West Coast, and running a business with the two founders on opposite coasts. And just talk about, the benefits, the challenges, how you guys are going about building the business, apart from each other.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall it's definitely tough. I think if I lived in San Francisco or if Andrew lived here, I think the synergies and collaboration would definitely be a lot stronger. Probably would meet up, a few times a week and, go to some co-working space. But I think that we've managed to do a great job with the circumstance that we are separated. Andrew's also getting his part-time MBA at Berkeley, so he's kind of tied to Berkeley right now for a little bit. It's definitely, I think I sit here, I work at home because, we haven't raised, so I'm not going to go find office space. I can go to a cafe, but, it definitely can be like lonely, dark days, the founder cycle of, will this work? Is it going to hit? What else can I be doing? Am I doing this right or wrong? So I think that can be like my personal challenge and grind to get through a lot at times. But, we have some engineers in LA and one in Milwaukee. So I think in our UI guy, Jack's in Raleigh. So it's just, finding the time to collaborate and, we don't want to waste people's times on calls, like just to have a call. Like, a lot of things can be communicated over Slack. But, we do want that team chemistry and, good dynamics happening and synergy. So I think it's just kind of, keeping in touch with people and on the team and, checking in and making sure everyone's okay. I mean, some guys are now back in the office 4 days a week. So it's just gotten a little harder as time's gone on to get everyone together. But, Andrew and I definitely make an effort to meet up with each other probably at least twice a year. And, we're going to keep that going. And hopefully as we grow and scale and maybe once we do raise money, we'll be able to do some more kind of travel together to, and, play more rounds. So it's a grind, but Andrew, I guess I'll let you kind of add your.
Yeah, I would echo most of that. Like it is tough. Like there are days where it's like, man, I wish we were just like in an office, had a whiteboard, and we're going back and forth. The like benefit I would say is the like hype cycles or the momentum are relatively low. Like in a good way, where like we're kind of riding this really steady wave and not like a roller coaster, which I think is where you get exhausting if you're like in person, and especially if you've raised capital and like you're spending like 12 hours in the office together and you're throwing everything at it and it's not working. Like that maybe is even like more draining. So I think finding like a really healthy balance remote where it's like here's what we're getting done, but like we've got other stuff going on and we kind of both acknowledge that. Like it actually is worked out where we can kind of do what we need to do. And I think we're both just so driven by the vision of what Bantee could be that sort of makes up for everything else.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about the logistics of running a digital business. Do you have, weekly stand-ups? Are you guys, Billy, to your point, you don't want to waste time, but are you having meetings 3 days a week, 2 days a week, or what's the logistics of the week-to-week basis for the team?
Yeah, we do have a standing team product call on Tuesdays where, if you can't make it, because some of these guys were like, I have, our engineers are like part-time, so they have like full-time jobs, and if they can't make it, they can't make it. But, they give their update on Slack for their progress on their kind of tickets that they're in charge of tackling that week. So we have that call, which Andrew essentially kind of runs as, being that he's kind of the head of the tech side of things at this point. And Andrew and I will always kind of catch up at least once a week individually, just us two, at least, whether it's like on a Monday, Friday, just aligning on like what we're going to go tackle. And I think that, like, to add to the other point, is like the accountability of things. Like, Andrew and I are both our own bosses. So it's kind of like, well, is Billy getting stuff done on his end? And I think, for me, it's a little more subjective because Andrew's like in the code more. So it's like very apparent when things get done because you see the updates come through on the app. So it's just like having Andrew hold me accountable to the things we discussed that I'm going to go get done. So I think that's kind of, the other challenge dynamic of being remote, but I think we're doing a good job of it. And so I think that's kind of to add on to just like how much we're chatting and talking. But I mean, Slack, is always available, or text. So, we're in communication, but, Andrew's got a busy schedule with school and, stuff. So it's not always necessary to just endlessly hop on calls to chat through things.
Well, I think what you said is important earlier, in that you don't want to waste each other's times, right? And time. And I think oftentimes companies, mainly bigger companies, just get stuck in meeting hell where they're going back to back to back just in meetings, and they're not able to get any work done. So, I think the approach that you guys are taking, and, in the few conversations we've had, the dynamic between the two of you is strong. So I think whatever you guys are doing is certainly working. Would love to hear your perspectives, both of your perspectives on especially since golf has been a part of your life, pretty much your entire life, kind of the evolution of the sport and how Bantee plays into that. I mean, we touched on it briefly a little bit about just the social aspect and the community, but maybe some other trends or innovations that's happening around the sport, whether alt golf or, other, I guess, diverse people playing the sport. Like, what are some other trends and innovations that kind of are making it exciting to be part of the game?
Yeah, I think a ton. It's changed so much. It's hard for me to say, like, if I'm just so much more attuned to what's happening in golf because I'm building a golf business, or if all of this stuff really is changing as fast as I think it is. But like, golf looks very different than it did 10, 15 years ago. So I think in some good ways, some bad. I think, as it relates to Bantee, the one thing that's frustrated me over the past like decade or so is that as technology's gotten better, like everything about golf has become about some version of performance. Like everything in the marketing golf world is drive it further, more forgiving irons, like lower your score, shave your handicap. And like, as a former competitive golfer, it's weird that that's just not that interesting to me. Like, I just don't find that compelling, and no one is really making the pitch, other than like you see the people like Malbin and people in that world where it's like, golf's cool, golf's fun, and it's like one of the best ways to spend time with your friends. And like, that's what golf is for me, at 31 years old. So that's the mentality that I'm trying to bring to Bantee, and also like, hopefully in the way that we think about acquiring consumers and like the next generation as well.
Yeah, I think I agree. And I think like, obviously nobody wants to play bad. So like, obviously I think that, while we say we're not going to make you better, we obviously would love to encourage people to practice and get better and have more fun. Because I do think the better you are, the more fun you're going to have. But I think the mentality is also like, like Andrew said, like, you're outside in nature for 4 hours, like hitting a ball every 10 minutes, like with hopefully your best friends, or you're meeting new people. So it's like, it should be fun regardless. It's like going on a walk and maybe hitting a bad shot every couple of minutes. So it's like, it's not the end of the world. And, I think more golfers need to just have fun with it and not get worked up over bad shots. But because that's me as my 17 handicap. I just think that, their golf is becoming more accessible, and whether it's on course play or virtual golf or like the top golf. So I think that there are a lot more consumers, getting onboarded to, having golf clubs in their hands at an earlier age. And I think that's where and kind of scoop up these, younger early adopters, and, they can find their home on Bantee to kind of be their group meet chat or log their personal rounds. And as the game's growing, hopefully the app just kind of scales with that, for us at least.
Yeah, that's awesome. It makes a ton of sense. As we start to close out the conversation, would love to hear from both of you on key lessons that you've learned in terms of growing Bantee, and maybe some advice to aspiring entrepreneurs that are either looking to start an app or just looking to get into the golf business space?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. There's just so many, but I do think that, like, for me early on, like, having started it and getting it kind of the legs rolling, it was like my baby and stuff. So I think that, like, learning to kind of let go and trust earlier on is also like, you don't want to overly trust, I think, like we kind of talked about it, but kind of not being afraid to kind of let people and delegate accordingly. I think, you kind of, if you're kind of a perfectionist the way I can be at times, you tend to overthink and, like, you want it to be perfect before you kind of present it to the world. But, that's where Andrew kind of came in and helped me with that mentality of like, we just got to ship it and go. Like, it's never going to be perfect. The announcement that it's live is, slightly irrelevant. Just get it live and tell people and just go. It's not going to be some, like, ribbon cutting grand ceremony. You kind of envision a product launch to be. It's like anything on social media. People might like it and then they move on and forget about it 5 minutes later. So it's just kind of delegating, and having the faith and trust that the other people are going to get their jobs done. And, I think hiring too. And fortunately for me, like, I've seemed to have brought on a lot of great people so far that, have been with us for over a year and a half or more. So I think spending the time to make sure you have those right team members is crucial too, because those are the guys you're working with every day. And that's been a huge win for me personally in this experience.
Yeah, I guess on my side, just thinking about like the entrepreneurship journey, the thing that I would probably tell people the most is like have a really narrow scope of what you think you're solving.
Mm-hmm.
We sort of mentioned it with Bantee, but like Bantee is a lot of things, which is both good and bad. The thing is, like, it just takes a lot of time to build all of those things, and we sort of will only know how good Bantee can be like once all of those things come together and, like, build this perfect world that we envision. But like for most people, and I think for most founders, like if there's just like one question that you can go answer and figure out if you're right or wrong about that, like just like start there.
Mm-hmm.
And don't try to combine too many things into one. So yeah, I would say like start small, like have a very narrow scope, and then just learn, iterate, present it to the world, learn, iterate, present it to the world over and over.
That's awesome. And before we close out, I do have like a rapid fire questions for you guys, just to give the audience a sense of your personalities, your connection to the game. But before I do ask those questions, was thinking as you talked about kind of community and sub community. For me, in a perfect world, I build the Range, the podcast, into some aspect of an audience, and it'd be awesome if the Range community lived on Bantee and listeners were able to track each other as they played rounds. And because I do think that however many people end up listening to these episodes, the interest or similar interest of entrepreneurship and golf will be the common thread. So I will look to build that as a Bantee member, and it'd be pretty cool to circle back and say there's 100 people on there. Just getting to know each other through your app would be fun. But before I let you guys go, just a handful of questions. Would love both of you guys to answer. We'll start with Billy. What's the one piece of golf gear you can't live without on the course? Do you have any favorites?
The Imperial rope hats.
There you go.
30.
Andrew, what about you?
Just in terms of gear, it's a good one. I mean, part of me wants to plug Birdie Book, but I would also say, like, just in terms of gear, I'm just going to say my sand wedge, because that is coming with me everywhere, especially these days.
There you go. Favorite course you guys have played on?
Probably Sabonic.
Where's that for
Long
those of
Island,
us that
New
don't
York.
know? Got it. Cool.
Yeah, I'll say the old course at St. Andrews.
If you could collaborate, if Bantee could collaborate with one golf brand, who would it be?
It's a really good question.
That's a really good question.
I hope we have the same answer.
You go first.
I'm going to say right now that I really think it would be great. It's so tough. I'm going to go with First Tee right now, because I think that, I know they're not necessarily, I guess they're a brand, but it would be great to, kind of work with the people kind of getting involved. They're the biggest golf association involved for youth golf development. So I just think from a business and, kind of perspective of things, like that one would be amazing. But I guess from the cool factor, like, there's the Malvins out there that would be really cool to do something with. But I think that's kind of the obvious answer usually, probably.
Yeah, I'll give two quick ones. One would be the NCAA, which might sound strange, but like I really think there's a massive opportunity to get in front of college golfers, and whether it's actually like with the D1 teams and doing scoring for them, or more on like the way that they market themselves. I think that would be a fun one. I'm also a huge Golfers Journal fan, so I would say those guys.
Cool. When you were talking about the birdie book and like the set of them, my first
Totally.
thought was Golfer Journal.
Yeah.
Biggest lesson golf has taught you guys about business?
For me, who is that pretty average golfer, just, the patience of, you're going to have good shots, you're going to have bad shots, and you just got to keep going and trying and don't give up. And it's just kind of, it's, as I said, it's a constant grind. So, you can't get too down on yourself, and just, you got to stay motivated. And the only person that's really going to, motivate you is yourself. So it's just kind of, seeing the light at the end of the tunnel and knowing it's there.
Yeah, my high school coach used to say like practice with purpose, which ended up being really instrumental to, I think, when I got good at golf, was like not just going to the range to hit balls, but like going to the range to hit like 10 6-irons with a 5-yard draw, and being really specific about what you're measuring. And I think that approach to business is also really important. Like, do this, but make sure that you're measuring something about it that you can use to then go do something else with.
I'd like to piggyback on that, because my college lacrosse coach I use this advice all the time, but his advice was always be better than the weather. So if it's like 40 and raining and practice is miserable, he's like, you got to be better than how shitty it is outside. And I think that relates a lot with doing a startup in business, of that, like, no matter how bad that call went or that, pitch you did, and you just got to continue to be better than, the surrounding environment around you. And that's always stuck with me, because it's just so true. Like, when it's freezing out, you just got to, put on your shoes and just go and be better than, the conditions around you.
I love that. I love that. I think that's a great place to jump. Before I let you guys go, please tell the audience where they could find your app, you guys, how to download it, your time to just pump your business.
Andrew, you want to send them off with all of our handles?
Yeah, sure. So at Bantee Golf on all of the socials, mainly Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, or X. And then just banteegolf.com is our website. You'll find it in the App Store. It's just Bantee, both iOS and Android. And yeah, please check it out and send us feedback. You'll actually see in the app, we just added a new like customer service icon on the homepage. And it's basically a way for us to funnel as much user feedback directly to me and Billy, like as quickly as possible. So like we really do want to hear from you guys.
That's awesome. Well, Billy, Andrew, appreciate the time, continued success with Bantee, and look forward to get this episode out to the world. Thank you guys.
Thanks, Ari.
Thanks, Ari. Appreciate it.